Welcome to the Bell Tech Talk segment of the Vertical MRO podcast. This segment takes you into the nuts and bolts of helicopter maintenance. It's about safety, support, and operational readiness. Top priorities for the Bell team. Join us for technical insights and personal stories from the front lines of helicopter maintenance from the industry-leading experts at Bell.
All right, welcome back to Vertical MRO. I'm your host, Val Medved, with my co-host there in the background, Mr. John Gray. How we doing, buddy?
Great, Val. Yeah, super stoked to be a part of this conversation, and always happy to hang out with the Bell folks. So this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. And today it's a second installation of our Bell Tech Talk, not TikTok, Tech Talk. So there's no dancing going on just yet. But we do have a Bell Tech Talk today featuring two great individuals of Scott Lane and of Greg Judd. Welcome back, Greg. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Happy to be back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We were just talking offline here. It's like he's like Carmen Sandiego, but I think he's local now. Where are you at now, Greg?
I'm home now. Yeah, last time we talked, I was in Guyana, I think.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to this side of the world, man. Good to have you.
Yep, thanks.
Scott, you're out of the sweaty mess in Georgia?
Yes, that's it. I'm in hot Atlanta, as they say.
Yes. Yes. Good old hot Atlanta. Let me tell you, every time that I've been to Atlanta, I've always been given really good food. I'm sure I come home, my cardiologist hates me, but I come back with some good Southern loving in me. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, you got to get some of that soul food while you're here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, gents, again, welcome to the second edition of our Bell Tech Talk. And this is, this is going to be one of those topics there you guys are going to run lead and point on, but it's kind of, if you get thinking about the exterior part of the conversation to what it really means, it means quite a bit. So we're going to get right into it on how to properly wash your aircraft to prevent the corrosion and the thousands of dollars damage to it. And that's going to come across, from both hands on and off and what experience you're chucking at it. So, you know what? We'll go paper, rock, scissors. No, just kidding. What do you guys here? Scott, you're new to the show. Well, let's hit the ground running here. What's your take?
You're right. Like, absolutely. It is just, it seems like such a crazy subject, right? Is, how to properly wash your aircraft. And every time that I've ever been around seeing an aircraft, the aftermath of it damaged during a wash, they always throw the new guy in on it, right? Like the guy that's new to the company, the brand new guy, go wash that 407 over there, or go wash that 206. And, of course, he is going to want to do a really good job. So he is just going to town on that thing, with the wash brush, banging the wash brush off the antennas, off the vertical stabilizers, all over the place. So that's
grimacing
what
the whole way while you're explaining it. So,
Oh yeah. So that's really why we want to talk about this today was how to properly wash it, and all the damage that can happen from, improperly washing an aircraft. It's crazy. I wrote an article for our old Rotor Breeze magazine that we used to have, and I think I called it the $50,000 wash job, and that's exactly what happens. Yeah.
It's funny. From a surface level, it seems like such an elementary conversation,
Exactly.
What could possibly talk about when it comes to washing aircraft, but there's so much that goes into it. I think about my agency and what we did. We're dealing with the city's one of the largest assets the city owns as far as a helicopter goes. And we're now tasked with going out and maintaining that aircraft in a way that doesn't damage it, but does the opposite of that, right? It cleans it. And it seems like it's so simple because everybody washes a car. But when it comes to washing aircraft, there's so many things to pay attention to. But we made sure that the new guys that showed up, they were kind of shadowing us, to learn what components to be careful with, what to tape off, and all the different things that you need to consider when washing aircraft. So as funny as it is, this is one of those topics I actually really like, and I think there's a lot to be learned here.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And, one thing that we deal with a lot is we're not always dealing with aircraft that are in salt-laden environments or on the coast or whatever. We're dealing with aircraft that are in the desert. And you think, it's in the desert, you don't have to treat it the same way. Well, you still have to consider, you need to wash the aircraft, no matter where it's at, whether it's the soot you're getting off of it. And by the way, a lot of this pollution that we fly through is not very good for the aircraft neither. And bugs that get on the main rotor blades, and you got to clean that stuff off. There's the acids in the bugs' bodies can be detrimental to the blades and to different parts of the aircraft too, right? There's more things to worry about than just salt on the aircraft when you're washing them. You need to wash, you need to think about what environment am I flying in? Have I been around, hey, sometimes we end up flying around volcanoes. You need to wash the engine, you need to wash the, so there's a lot more layers to it than just, hey, let's go watch the helicopter, right? So
think of the contaminants that you're flying not only around, like people think salt wash is kind of like the be all. No, the salt wash is just but a sliver of probably a different type of wash. Think about the ones that are fighting fires and you're top of the smoke, the soot, and whatever toxins that you're kind of that you're navigating through there, and you got to come back and your bird is just black from all the wrong reasons, right? So it's just gross.
Yeah, there's it's not just the external. You need to wash the engine as well, right? Internally. So there's a lot of layers to it, and it needs to be done correctly, right? So
operating out of the Inland Empire in Southern California, we have a lot of bad air quality days. So there's a lot of times we'd watch a ship and immediately go fly, and you land, and just after one flight, if you look at the leading edges of the aircraft, you're seeing dirt, visible dirt and soot and who knows what else. You take your finger across one of the horizontal struts, and you look at it like, holy cow, it's not just one flight, So you think about that. And then you think about, like you said, the exhaust, the carbon that's coming out of the engine, getting stuck to the tail. And I think everybody that's got an aircraft is really prideful of what they have. They want to make sure it looks appealing and as beautiful as possible. So having that in mind, this is just one of those conversations that's vitally important.
But there's another facet of it too. As a maintainer, when you're washing the aircraft, you get to know every rivet on that aircraft. I know that sounds a little deep, but that's your opportunity to do a good visual while you're out there cleaning the aircraft.
Oh, we're missing a big couch here now. If Greg's getting deep, we're missing a big couch here. We can sit back and let the psychiatrist Bill kick in here.
No, but Greg is he is absolutely right on the washing the aircraft. That to me, when I worked in the Gulf of Mexico, and we washed the aircraft every single day. That was the very first thing we did. Our very first maintenance task was to wash the aircraft. And you pick up so many things that are wrong with the aircraft while you're washing it. You can look at chafing issues or anything like that, or a broken pedostatic drain tube or something like that. That's where you see everything. And that was really, honestly, that was the best post-flight, because I shouldn't say this, but we all know pilots don't do very good post-flights, right?
You hear that, John? Are you catching that, John? Oh, the pilot rips keep on happening on the MRO show.
Well, let me defend the pilots here for a minute. They've flown a long day, right?
Yeah, they did. They had a 10, 12-hour day. Yeah.
They have a long day out there. They're fatigued. We all know from mechanics, when we're fatigued, we miss stuff. So pilots, when they get out, they're going to do a post-flight, and they're going to miss something. But that's just human nature.
Yeah,
it's going to be what it is, But that's the check and balance of our system.
That's Scott, exactly to your
right.
point, I think you're going in the right direction there. When you're cleaning the aircraft, just like as if we were cleaning our cars, motorcycles, RVs, trucks, whatever, we get to know the grooves, bumps, and sounds of that particular aircraft, right? So it's like I associate with the vehicles, just that we own and operate and clean. It's like, oh, the scratch was in here last week. How the hell did this get here?
Exactly.
Wifey, kids, anybody want to step into this role? So
right.
Yeah, oil field worker, whatever.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah. Yep.
Nice. So now you've flown in some heavy situations there, like you said, you worked in the Gulf, so you're in high salt, corrosive, heavy air area.
Yes.
When you're washing down a vehicle, I guess general, is there a particular proper water to use? Is it generally standard across all kind of elevations?
I am glad you mentioned that because that is a hot topic. The water is the water has to be, honestly, it has to be deionized water. It has to be demineralized. When I worked in the Gulf of Mexico, every offshore or every base that we had, land base, we never used water out of the hose, just right out of the ground. Every aircraft had a reverse osmosis system on there. Every wash station, I should say, had a reverse osmosis system. And because all the hard water that comes out of the ground, it's full of salt and hard minerals. And so those minerals and salt, they can get into all the nooks and crannies of the aircraft, and they start causing all kinds of issues. But yeah, the water is extremely important.
It's like washing with another corrosive. So you're not doing any good by washing with tap water.
Right.
You're just adding another element of corrosion to the layer. You know?
Well, you're probably even, if you decide to just take regular water and wash it, that, like you said, the insertion of the minerals into particular rivets, sets, nuts, bolts, you're fast forwarding the corrosion by X amount.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of areas on the aircraft that water can get to that you can't reach, right? You can't reach, you can't wipe. So it's important to use fresh water and the right detergent. You know,
it's funny you bring the water thing up, because we actually took a lot of ribbing for having deionized water. People would come visit the hangar, like, "Oh, look at you, pretty boys! Have the soft water. You can't just have normal water. It's got to be special." And it was a good joke, you know. We got made fun of for it, but it was us and the fire department. Each fire station has a deionized water system that they use to wash their fire engines and stuff. But it was true, you know. You wash the aircraft with that deionized water, and you compare that with washing your own personal vehicle with a hose, and you get done with the personal vehicle and the hose. If you didn't dry it properly, you have the white spots from the calcium deposits.
That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right.
You just see why you don't want that on your aircraft, you know.
So deionized in all elevations is the proper way to go.
That's our recommendation, definitely.
Yeah, as Greg said, you know, in our corrosion control manual, chapter 10, it talks about that.
Hey, listen, guys, and anytime you want to reference out a manual call out or a page or a section, feel free to do so. That helps everybody that's going to be listening to this kind of automatically defer right to it.
So let's talk about that for a minute real quick. You know,
please go ahead.
We have our washing instructions. We also have the corrosion control guide that we publish for our aircraft. It's a general guide, meaning it's good practices for no matter what aircraft you're flying, right? But just because we publish that doesn't mean you can't go above and beyond that in your environment. You know, we have a lot of folks that operate in the salt-laden environment, and it's not that our corrosion control guide doesn't cover it. It's just sometimes you got to be a little extra vigilant in certain areas. I guess that's the way to say it, huh, Scott?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a guide, you know, and we kind of leave it up to the operator to tailor that to their own operations, because all operations are different. So yeah, you really need to.
So like a base minimum, if you will.
Exactly.
I can see, you know, operating the Gulf in that salty environment is much different than operating in the desert. You know, you have different corrosive considerations taking place for each one. You know, whereas the Gulf is obviously salt and the contaminants that go with that. In the desert, it's other contaminants, like we talked about, just environmental contaminants, you know, from industrial pollutants and whatnot. So just because there's not a corrosive, salty environment doesn't mean there's not other toxins and you know, corrosive type things to pay attention to.
Well, yeah, to be honest, you know, I grew up working on helicopters in Utah, and we have the salt flats, and we'd have aircraft go out and film at the salt flats and come back with salt stuck to the skid tubes. So, you know, in the seat pans, you name it, it was everywhere. And so, you know, you don't know what's in the dirt that's being tracked around in the helicopter and all that too. And that, you know, we're not just talking about washing the outside, you need to wash the inside too. We've seen floor pans. I mean, let's talk about EMS aircraft for a minute. You know, they have drip trays, they have everything for contaminants, right? Blood or whatever it is, you know, that needs to be cleaned up too, because that's highly corrosive. And when you do a lot of heavy refurbs on aircraft like that, you see all of the damage that can be done by not properly treating and cleaning up, you know, any sort of contaminant in the cabin or on the exterior of the cabin. You know? So another thing to think about. when you're watching.
Greg's on a deep dive today, man. He's going
I'll
deep
tell
on all
him.
this whole conversation. I didn't even think about EMS, but yeah, you're right. Like, God forbid that there was anything that's encapsulated in bags and fluids that the patient might need, or there's excessive bleeding that happens in the cabin. I didn't even go there, man. Greg, you're on a deep dive today, man. I love it.
I'm in.
You're in. You're all in, baby.
Here's another crazy thing. Up in the north where there's snow, guys walk around on helipads that, of course, have been salted, so nobody slips and falls. When the EMS crew comes in, they have all that salt and contaminant on their feet. And if they don't have a plastic tray or anything in there like that, I've seen the pilots' pedals and where they rest their heel rests all corroded out under there just from the salt melting off of their shoes and getting in there as well.
Now that you mention it, I live in the north. I've seen a lot of these older 204, 205s. And now that you mention it, wow, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's like always that little rust spot where their lazy foot is sitting on.
Right. There. How did that get there? Right. You're like, how is this one spot here? That's what it's from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why has it got to be lazy?
Excellent. Say that again, John.
Why has it got to be lazy?
Oh, sorry. Why is that guy's tired foot always there? That's what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The tired foot of a pilot. Yeah, I feel it. So the water episode side of this is like this is going to be a base layer type of effect, and we're talking about that. So I'm glad we kind of covered that. So it's just not regular hose water. So that if anybody listening to this, please stop that. Firstly, secondly, listen to these wise men's advice here and kind of reference to the manual pages. They've given you the guideline and kind of step into that direction here. But going off what's next mixed with the water is what kind of soap would you use? What do we do? Like a low phosphate, high phosphate? What are we talking about here?
Well, the soap that we recommend is called out in our corrosion control guide as well. And I believe, we might edit this out or not, but I believe it's low sulfates, because I think the low sulfates helps counteract any contaminants that could be in the water. I could be wrong, but there is a mil-spec, a specific mil-spec soap that we use, and that's what we recommend. Because everybody could just go out and get car soap and stuff like that. That's not what you want to use.
Right. As much as nice as what is that? Eukanuba smell would be on a banana on a helicopter. Let's not wash our helicopters with it. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. No, it's we have a list of approved cleaning products, right? But you need to stick to the aviation based ones that are good for aluminum, structure and believe it or not, even the composite combination panels, with aluminum skin and honeycomb core and all that, they're subject to it too, right? So I've seen operators use everything from Aeromagnolia to RDox and different solutions, different types of aviation grade cleaners. But look at our chapter 13 in the consumables and standard practices, and you'll get the soap. You can find the soap that we recommend, or the mil-spec, as Scott said.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I mean, to agree with what Scott's saying, the point is, you don't, like Scott said, don't go out and grab yourself a bucket of Dawn and think you're doing a good thing there, because you may not be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good old Dawn takes the grease out of anything.
I know, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hey, look at these cuticles. Look how cute they are.
I know it. Oh, to jump back in on the water thing, a reverse osmosis system sounds like, oh my gosh, that would be really expensive, right? It's really not. They have them at certain supply outlets, like, for instance, like a Granger or something like that. You can get them for, relatively inexpensive for considering what you're washing. They're not that much, and some companies offer a service. They'll come out and change your filters for you. They'll test your water and things like that. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's not that. It sounds really expensive, but it's really not.
I think RO systems are more common than we think. It's I know we had one installed about a year ago, and ours is just for our home front. So just imagine someone, like you said, you're bang on, Scott, when you're saying, look what you're washing, look at the investment. What's your return on investment that you're protecting? And
exactly.
Can you afford to not do that because it'll cost you more in the long run. So, yep, I agree with you. RO systems are probably more common than we all think.
Well, it's a common theme in aviation, and more so in the helicopters. We'll spend a lot of money on buying the aircraft, and we'll spend a little bit of money on a service rig, but everything else, what are we doing this for? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Oh wait.
Yeah.
When we're actually, you can cost yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars and not even know that you're doing it. The damage builds up over time, and then it becomes, wow, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I think of this? Or why didn't I know about this? Because a lot of it's just we take a lot of things for granted as we're doing our job every day to day. Maintenance technicians are out there washing and cleaning with certain chemicals, but how many of us really? I mean, I'll be honest with you. Until we deep dive into this, I didn't really think about. I thought back of when I was doing the maintenance on aircraft, hands-on maintenance, and I didn't dig it. Why am I using this? Why am I doing that? The book says to use this. I'm going to use it. You don't really think about, why am I really using it? Other than, hey, the book tells me I should be using this product, right?
Yeah, or you don't know why you're using it. It's just because that's what Joe told you to use, right? So,
Yeah. Passed down from one technician to the next. You're out there working nights, and hey, we wash it this way,
and it could be wrong, right? That could be wrong, and you're just
update yourself, keep yourself updated for sure, especially listen, like you said it here before, Greg, it's just, you didn't even think about it, right? Like, it's like, it's one of those base conversations, but if you have to go back and you're operating a pretty high dollar value machine, and you should probably look at what's going to take it to the cleanest specter of it without damaging it. So kind of going back when we just started here, when you're kind of having do you recommend a little more experienced individual, or the lowest kind of and we spoke about it with the lowest rung of fresh kid from the AME school? He's coming in and all of a sudden, hey, go wash the helicopter. He's like, so like it's probably going to take a little bit of training, but it's probably going to take a little experience. Or you count on that guy who's done it before to kind of really kind of him have one delegated person, or what would you do?
Initially, I would have, years ago, I would have said, hey, go watch the helicopter to the new guy. Mm-hmm. And if you need anything, let me know. Right?
Okay.
And that's
after
the truth,
studying
right?
this, and after years of experience, I would say, hey, you're going to go with senior lead mechanic here, and he's going to teach you how to wash this aircraft, and he's going to teach you everything you need to be careful with, and he's going to explain what we're using, why we're using it, and go into the depths where to wash, where not to wash. With FADEC controlled aircraft, you got to be real careful about getting water on certain electronic components. I mean, there's a million layers to this, but yeah, I would to answer your question today, I would say get your senior guys that know how to wash the aircraft properly, training the young folks, and give them,
gotcha.
Set them up for success, not failure, right? We want them to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and do it properly. And it's going to save the company money down the road, and you're going to be up more. It's all about flight. You don't make money sitting in the hangar under maintenance, right?
You just took the words right out of my mouth, my friend. You just took it right out. So it's like you said, God forbid you actually have a system with the FADEC in there, all of a sudden a little bit of extra moisture gets into it when it's not supposed to.
It's the Christmas tree lights of FADEC failures, all associated with water in a cannon plug.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Scott, you want to build on to that one anymore?
Well, it's not like you can take a bag of rice and throw your ECU in it. It just doesn't work that way, to get the moisture out of it. But to build on to what Greg was saying, the deck is so important on your aircraft too. And to make sure your drains are working, here again, in the South, boy, you get a June bug in that drain, it ain't draining nothing, right? It's stopped up. So yes, drains are so important. Because if your drains don't work, the water will build up, and we have a lot of stuff that's on the deck that, cannon plugs and transducers and all that kind of stuff that'll definitely add another layer, like Greg was saying, to your headaches, your electrical headaches, is just making sure those drains are working properly.
Let's be careful. Let's talk about drains for a minute.
Oh,
while we're on the drain
Please,
subject. Yeah. They're drains. They're not inlets. They're drains. So it's not a good idea to put the hose up any of the drains you see. Don't do that. That's bad. We see that on occasion. I had an experience one time with a long ranger that, once again, gentleman thought he was going to help us out and wash his aircraft before he brought it to maintenance, and he promptly filled his fuel cell full of water through the fuel vent.
Jeez.
And the placard was on the side of the aircraft, very clear. But sometimes you have overachievers there ready to help us out.
So he gave the helicopter an enema, is what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what's
Jesus
crazy
Christ.
is he flew it from his hangar to our hangar. And when he landed it was we could hear it was not running right, and it didn't flame out. But we literally sumped like 4 or 5 gallons of water out of it. We had to clean the whole fuel system.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was very fortunate it didn't flame out in the transition. He only had to fly, quarter mile to our hangar.
It's still too much with 4 or 5 extra gallons of water on board.
Anyhow. Yeah.
We're chuckling about it, but it really does happen more often. It happens a lot.
I believe it.
I witnessed it. I witnessed the same thing, because the drains get clogged. So they think they take the water hose and they go up the drain to try and blow it out. And those drains, like Greg was saying, they're very close together. And I watched the guy squirting water up in there. And of course, nothing's coming out, right? So it's like, hey, that's a fuel drain, man. That's a fuel vent. So guess what we were doing? We were taking a fuel system apart, right? So, it does happen. It really does happen.
If you have to clear a drain, the best thing is air.
Yeah.
Just low air pressure and just blow on your drains, but try to blow them from the top down. Don't try to blow them from the belly back up.
Exactly.
I can probably imagine anybody who sees the title of this podcast, like, what are they going to tell me more that I don't know about washing a helicopter?
I know.
So that's the shock and awe factor that we're going to build with this here, because clearly Greg has gone deep. Scott, you're talking about in the deep south here, what kind of like what it takes. So like I'm hoping that somebody after listening to this is going, you know what? I missed this for the last 30 years.
I'll admit it. When I started thinking about this and studying it a little more, there was a lot of stuff I could have done much better or differently. I will do differently going forward. You just learn stuff and you see the damage that not being able, not doing it correctly.
Val, you asked the question earlier that I wanted to touch on of, how do you structure placing personnel around the aircraft when you wash it? And what we did, and it was helpful for us, and I think it's probably helpful for others, is we put our most senior and knowledgeable person on the pressure washer. We use a pressure washer and low pressure. And that person will basically be the quarterback for the operation. You're watching everyone with the brushes scrub the aircraft and making sure they're not bumping something. And by the way, with the brushes, we had padded bumpers around the outside of the brushes, so that if somebody did bump the aircraft itself, it wouldn't chip the paint, or hopefully not as bad. We did get some chips, but that person would observe everyone doing their job, and then you could call timeout if you had to. Plus, when you're rinsing the aircraft, that person knows where to put water and where not to. Hopefully, that's the goal. So you don't have multiple people shooting water in places that doesn't belong. But for us, that was helpful. And again, the risk that you run of saying, hey, new guy, come over here and wash this, is what we just described, putting water where it doesn't belong and inducing problems that you didn't know could be a problem until they are a problem. So that was helpful for us.
Oh, taking a drain and making it an inlet, that's not a good idea. Like that's just bad no matter what industry you're in. That's just not good practice.
The other thing we did too a lot was, well, not a lot, but one thing we differentiated, like we'd have a wash brush for the fuselage, and then we'd have a separate wash mitten for the windshields, for the windows.
There you
so
go.
You didn't get contaminants scratching the windows.
Thanks for kind of walking that into the next one, because that was going to kind of be the next question here, is like, what kind of brush are you using? What kind of, like, is it different type of materials, a microfiber? What are we thinking? There's just keeping it separated from, say, airframe to windows to plastics to so on and so forth.
Yeah, the brushes that we would use, we kind of had a different variety of brushes. Some of the brushes that we used were actually like a microfiber towel on a brush head, and we would use those majority of the time around the whole fuselage. We always used by hand. We did the windshields and horizontal stabilizers. We always did those by hand with an additional microfiber type brush. And the stiff bugs and stuff, we had a bristled brush, but it wasn't a coarse bristled brush. It was a soft bristled brush that we would use.
So I guess the other part of that too is when you're putting that soap on and you're about to, I guess, with said microfiber towels or that soft bristle, is like, I'm assuming, did you let it soak for a little bit, or do you need to agitate it into the panel, or how, like, is there a wait time, or is just kind of like as you saw it kind of deteriorate and start kind of flying down a little bit, that's when you start rubbing it? Was there an agitation period, I guess I should ask Scott?
No, we would just mix our soap.
Every soap's a little different.
It would depend on the type of soap you're using, and just use the recommendations on the soap for mixing. There's always a dilution factor on there, what to use. But normally, no, we would just wet the aircraft first, of course, and then a lot of times that would loosen up the bugs and grime and stuff, and then we would just hit it with the brush and the soap afterwards. That would do it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can see the soot and everything and the grime melting off when you start washing it. You can kind of see when you put a layer of soap on. Well, we used to wash everything with the hand. We'd wet it down, like Scott says, with just a garden hose. Not necessarily a pressure washer, but just a garden hose, maybe a nozzle on it or whatever. Just get it wet and then put your soap on. Your soap solution on,
right,
with a mitten or whatever, and then you'd watch. You could watch it. It would, like, especially the soot would start to melt. And
would it be okay
up
to use that, like a pressure washer?
in certain cases? Yeah. I don't think we recommend it, but I mean, there's times where you like I used to pressure wash the skid gear all the time because it's in the dirt, it's in the mud.
Yeah.
You can sit there and scrub on it with a brush, or you can take a pressure washer to it.
And not so much the flight critical parts.
No, not so much everything else. I mean, it's like a typical garden hose pressure is more than enough to just rinse stuff off, from my experience. I mean, but are there times where you could use a pressure washer? Sure. You're not going to crank it at 1,000 PSI, obviously, but it's nice to have some, it's nice to have some pressure there.
When we used our pressure washer, it was in the lowest pressure setting. It was basically a pressurized mist that was coming out.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's acting like a garden hose, essentially, just a little bit of a wider range. That's not something you're going to put 2 inches from the body of the aircraft.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to make sure that what's landing
we got
on
an
the
extra
aircraft.
speed hole today. Sorry, John. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's important to point out, because I could see someone putting a high pressure nozzle on a pressure washer, and like you said, all of a sudden you got a Texas racing stripe on the side of the ship, and you're like, hey, wait a minute.
Explain that one to your superiors. Is that a bullet hole or a pressure washer hole?
Dear Chief.
Yeah. All right. So now we've covered the soaps, we've covered the waters here. And after we've scrubbed all the down, we've agitated it to a degree and pressure washed it off. When we're drying it, same thing applies. Microfiber, soft fibers to kind of dry it off, to kind of get all the water off it. Scott, I'll let you answer this one kind of right off the ticket.
Yeah, you can do that, but the best thing to do, honestly, is to run the aircraft.
Oh.
So what you want to do is, you want to do your engine wash, do your compressor rinse if you need to do it then, and do it before you run the aircraft. So wash the aircraft, do your compressor wrench, freshwater compressor wrench, and then actually run the aircraft. Because when you run the aircraft, that gets all those water that can find its way in the nooks and crannies of the rotating components, and it slings it all out. And that's the best way to do it.
Shake it out of the corners. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like you said, then you can just use a towel and wipe it down. But quite honestly, if you're using, and you can probably attest to this, if you're using deionized water, you really don't have to dry it off, because it just sheens right off of there.
There's no minerals that make it stick. It's just
exactly.
clean,
Yeah.
water, so
Yeah.
it goes away. It evaporates and leaves nothing there. So the other thing we need to touch on here real close is, all the aircraft use elastomerics these days at different different locations, and soap and elastomers, you need to be caught conscious of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you're washing like tail rotor flapping bearings or your main rotor lead lags and your shears and all that, when you're washing your overhead, make sure you get that soap cleaned off and rinsed off good, so that it doesn't sit there and cook on those rubber
Great point.
components.
Great point.
So
certain soaps and certain plastics don't react well if it's left long enough.
correct.
Roger that.
And it goes back to using what we recommend too for washing, for cleaning solutions.
Sure.
So,
And oh, by the way, you have a rotor on top. You just downwash it all. Let it all fall down.
yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a big
cool
fan to dry it off.
cool reason to start the thing up. Let's go.
Take it around the patch. That'll dry it even better. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Fly it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, if you're high and dry like where Greg is today, up in Utah, a little altitude there, you'll get drier there. But to you, Scott, I'm not going to believe that. Just that you might come back just as wet.
It'll come back all sweaty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're gonna wash it again. Yeah.
That's where the man and machine become one again, right? I understand. I feel your pain.
Yeah. Not gonna work you too hard today, baby.
Yeah. No. I'm changing my shirt. You should probably change your seat. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Drying this off. Okay. That's the cool way to dry it off. And it's just, you see, especially you get, like, referring back to the car detail where they have these little air guns now. They hold on these vehicles for air guns. You know what helicopter pilots do? They just turn the machine on. Let's get this dry.
There you go.
Nice.
It's the best way to do it.
That's a salute to you, John. That's good job, pilot.
Good for something. Dry the aircraft.
and don't forget, we have to wash the rotor blades too. So
Yes.
There you go.
Clean your blades. So you need to dry them off as well. And a lot of the blades have.
Yeah, I was going to say probably an unspoken one. We should probably touch base on that one just the same because they're pretty important. All right, outside of the engine and the transmission, their blades on top and on the tail, they're pretty important too. So properly washing those things down and drying and kind of setting them straight. If you guys want to go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, it's another opportunity to get in there and have a good look at your rotor blades when you're washing them. You get up there and wash them with a hand mitt, get everything cleaned off them, the bugs off of them, off the leading edge, and whatever. You have a good chance to inspect the blade while you're there washing it off. But that all those corrosive environmental components get pounded into the leading edge of these blades, right? And you need to sit and scrub on that and clean them up so you don't have salt chewing away or corrosive chewing away at your abrasion strips. Depending on the model, like our L models have a big aluminum spar, and I think we've all seen those that have been operated in those environments where it looks like a hacksaw blade down the front of the leading edge after a few.
Yeah.
And you have to reprofile the blade or whatever. But even the blades that have like the nickel alloys on them, abrasion strips, it's still important to keep those clean and have a good look at them. And what better time than when you're washing the blade? And wash it, clean it up, have a good look at it.
Yeah,
you're right there. Why not?
Oh yeah, and then waxing those blades too. That's really important as well. Yeah. We call out a specific wax to use. Again, has a specific mil-spec to use, and waxing the blades is really important as well.
It kind of all goes back to, and I think one of our past guests, kind of like, as much as technology there still is a human feel for the aircraft. And generally, when you're starting to wash these things, you're developing that feel. You're developing kind of the grooves. You're seeing if it needs any premature or scheduled maintenance, for it's coming time for the maintenance. That's kind of that'll be your time to tell about it. So it's getting that hands-on experience with said aircraft is probably like jump right back to what you're saying, Greg. If there's any DLAM happening or something landing there on the blades, you're going to figure that out right away.
Exactly. And it's important to note that the person watching that aircraft may not have seen that aircraft. That might be the first time they're dealing with that aircraft, right?
Yep.
Versus someone, like John, in your case, you're flying the same few aircraft every day or whatever. But let's say you're in an offshore environment where an aircraft comes to your base that you haven't seen before. It lands, you're cleaning an aircraft you don't know anything about.
Yeah,
really. So here's your chance to get to know that aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds a little corny, but you get to have a good look at that aircraft up close when you're washing it. So
nothing corny about that whatsoever, Greg. And it's especially if you're bringing in, and I guess I'm trying to relate this to, like if you had a single aircraft coming into a fleet of aircraft and that's from an entirely different environment. There could be some contaminants there that you might not be aware of, and all of a sudden it could be spread around to the hangar. It could be touched by another person in the hangar, and you just don't know by having, improperly or not cleaned aircraft. And that's, I'm only speaking from the boat side of the world, because I know you get off of one lake, you always got to go for a decontamination before you get into the other. Mm-hmm. So I got to imagine aircraft can't be any different.
No, they're not. I mean, and in a maintenance environment, say you're in a repair station, it may be a new customer.
Yeah.
Aircraft shows up, you don't know anything about. You've read the history possibly in the records, but you don't really know the aircraft, right? So it's always good to start off. I'll tell you, I had a really good friend of mine who taught me a lot. We all have mentors, right? We all have somebody we look up to in the industry.
Shout it out, man. Give it to him, Greg. Shout him out.
Tony Dickerson. He is awesome. But he said to me one day, I was sitting there cleaning a component, worked for him for a while, quite a while. Great supervisor, great guy to work with. I'm cleaning it up, and he goes, "Yep." He says, "You can't inspect something that's dirty, can you?"
That's a good point.
Word of the wise.
That's
a good one.
Okay, because I felt like, man, am I taking too long to clean this? It was a tail rotor gearbox we'd taken off of the Jet Ranger, and I was trying to get all the soot and everything out of all the nooks and crannies on it and everything. Lord knows when the last time I saw any soap. I thought, am I taking too long? I was all nervous about it. Is this taking too long? He goes, "You can't inspect something you can't see. You need to clean it. You're doing a good job."
Yeah, that's great.
So that's so funny you say that, Greg, because the exact same thing happened to me working for an operator. A little bit different though, but I would spend so much time cleaning the aircraft. Like we'd take all drive shaft covers off and stuff, and I would just get in there and clean everything, before I inspected it. And I had a supervisor that asked me, he goes, "Why are you taking so long? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have to clean it. I got to clean it. I can't see. There's so much dirt and stuff in there. I got to clean it first before I can inspect it." And he kind of looked at me. He was like, "Oh, okay," and walked away. Right. So kind of gave him an answer, but it was funny that you say that, because that is so important. You got to clean it before you can inspect it. You can't see it if it's dirty, right? Well, I think we've all had situations like that.
You want to find a smoking rivet, like you'll see mung around a rivet, and you wipe it and it just streaks, right? And you keep wiping it, and there's still stuff there. There's your tell, right? You got a loose rivet. The point is, you get that hands-on with the aircraft where you can actually just detail it and look at it close. You're going to know much more and be way more comfortable with that aircraft from a good cleaning. Just spend time cleaning on it.
Yep.
So,
gotcha. Scott, you touched base on this here just a couple minutes ago with the waxes involved on it. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a pretty high standard when it comes to the waxing of a particular aircraft. I've seen some pretty kick-ass paint schemes on these things. So wax would probably be a great idea for these things to be protected by it. Again, right. I'll leave it to you to answer this one here. It's got to be a certain standard.
Well, for the main rotor blades, for sure, it has to be a certain standard. And you don't want to use a wax that has any silicon base to it, because that silicon in there, if the blades ever need to be refinished, they may have a hard time getting the paint to stick to the blades if they've been penetrated by that silicon wax. But on the fuselage, I've seen a lot here lately that guys are, like you were saying, these really cool paint jobs that are having detailers come out and actually do like a ceramic coating on the aircraft.
Auto detailers.
Yeah. And I don't think, Greg, I don't think we have any objection to that.
I'm not aware of any, no. I mean, it's the paints are aviation paints, but a lot of those aircraft are painted with automotive paints too.
Yeah, they are.
So when they're customized,
having a lot of ceramic coatings done on aircraft, we've been seeing a lot lately, and again, it calls out a specific wax to wax the fuselage paints as well. Yeah,
got it.
And there's a lot of dry wash systems out there too that we see also.
I've seen the dry wash systems. Yeah, mm-hmm. yeah, good call.
You have to be careful with some of those, stay away from your static ports. And if it's an IFR ship, that's even more critical. Your pitot pedostatic tubes don't put anything on those because it'll just cook on them, right?
Right.
But let's be honest, a paint job in today's world, a paint job could cost you $60,000-$70,000 on an aircraft. So why wouldn't you invest in a little bit of money to,
Keep that protected.
yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. And like you mentioned earlier, John and Val, that this is our pride and joy. As a pilot and as a maintainer, this is why we exist, is this aircraft.
Yep.
So let's keep her pretty, right?
Yeah, it's actually a really good segue into a question that's come up is, if you have the wrong person doing something that maybe have the right intention of doing, but they make a mistake and cost the agency you're working for money, what's the most expensive mistake that could be made as a result of that goodwill?
I would go to the fuel system contamination number one, but even filling your avionics, your pedostatic system full of moisture can be a big problem in today's integrated avionics system with added harsh units and all that. They have filters and they have check valves and all that, but there's a lot, definitely. I don't know, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Avionics bays. I know on one model aircraft we have 429 has a scoop on the side of the aircraft. It's for cooling air, fresh air. And I've seen water get, a heavy-handed person washing the aircraft, not realizing what that is, and spray water directly into that bay. That can be quite expensive. But I think the biggest one I see, and unfortunately the most common one, is the horizontal stabilizers. The vertical finlets on 407, 430, 206 series, boy, you can really damage those. And you'll put so many dents in there per square inch, it actually, the panel is structurally unsound at that point. So you may have to replace the horizontal stabilizer and the finlets, and you're talking $40,000, $50,000 like right now. So that can be extremely
Straight
expensive.
remove and replace just from one couple or even a few dings. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
The damage tolerances on those finlets is pretty restrictive, and you can have a dent, but if it's too close to the bond line for the attachment, then that needs to be repaired or replaced. But I've also seen, believe it or not, I've seen dents in the tail boom where they've hit the tail boom on top of the horizontal and underneath, the transition flange there, the mount, the support. I've seen those dented as well, and those are pretty heavy materials. So
They were using a sledgehammer that day to get that soot out of the tail.
Donkey Kong's out there washing the ship.
Yeah.
You got your young AME out there with a hatchet cleaning it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a bad day.
Scott, you brought up the 429. When you think about that particular aircraft and washing, what's the most critical component to be careful around on that ship?
I would say, it's a very robust aircraft, but, it has the pedostatic or the pedo tubes in the front. We've seen a lot of those get damaged by people, washing them aggressively. But honestly, I think it's the main rotor components.
Yep.
Not properly washing the main rotor components in certain environments, because those components up there it's very integral up there. There's a lot of nooks and crannies up there, so it really is important to get those components cleaned properly, to rinse them with fresh water when needed, good water. Rinse them with the good water, deionized water, and then follow up with some soap and proper solvent if needed, and then rinse them again. That, in my opinion, is probably the most costly component on that aircraft is the main rotor system.
That's all you need is an improper vibration reading or something like that because of a debris buildup in the rotor head. So
and corrosion.
Point.
Yeah, corrosion's a big issue on all of our components, whether it's 429, 407, 206. If you don't get that salt or that contaminant off there over time, you can have corrosion issues that get real expensive.
And now you're just chasing gremlins at that point.
It's as a friend of mine said one time, corrosion never sleeps, right? it's always actively doing something.
Right.
So, but the other thing, I'm a big window guy. I don't like bright spots in windows. I mean, when I see somebody washing a window that I don't think is correct, I'm going to be the first one that jumps in and says, "Hey, don't do that. Here's why. Do it this way." I've spent too many years trying to fix bright spots and all that in windows, and you just end up changing them anyhow. So,
and yet another costly mistake if you're having to change the window, right? So,
and downtime, changing the windshield on most aircraft, you can plan on at least 2 days, by the time your Pro Seal cures and all that. If you can get, you got to get the window out, removing the windshield, putting a new one in, laying it up, and, getting it bolted in and sealed up. It just takes time, and then you throw in a wire strike kit on top of that, more layers to remove to get your windshield out.
You got to keep a clean line of sight too, and not only your windshield. Like John, I'm sure you can attest to this. I'm not sure if you ever flew with one, but if you have a bubble window there too that you're flying out of, that thing's got to be completely dust and it's got to be clean as basically as ice. You have to look right through it and keep it clean.
Yeah, not on the bubble windows necessarily, but the front facing windscreens. The worst would be when you've got somebody that's improperly cleaning those things. They're swirling the debris that's on there.
Oh,
you're flying into the sun, and all of a sudden you can't really see that well in front of you. You can't see the aircraft. You can't see the target you're looking for. And then it's like, okay, well, this is worthless. So it's a big deal.
It is. Also, with the night vision goggle operations too, MVG operations, you get halos in the windows from not cleaning them properly. The same things that give you a bright spot in the daytime will give you a halo at night, or a defect that you. Yeah, it's a pet.
But all this at the end of the day, this drives up your DOCs like crazy, right?
Yeah, and to add to Scott's point there, it drives up the DOCs. Hopefully, we're not over the top scaring people away from
right,
washing the aircraft or whatever, which I'm sure we're not. But the positive takeaway, in my opinion, from this whole thing is you do that correctly, you're going to learn a lot about the aircraft, and you're going to be able to maintain it better. And it's going to, the reliability rate of the aircraft is going to go up if you take care of it like this.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter whose model. It doesn't matter what manufacturer. Take care of the product. It'll take care of you, right?
Yeah.
And they're always talking to you. They're always talking to you as aircraft. We always, we say this, so just listen to them. They're talking to you. Well, you got to look at them too. Sometimes you got to read their lips. So
go ahead, John.
I just wanted to bring up something that we talked about offline. This is a while back. And I think, Scott, you brought this up. When it comes to rinsing the aircraft, this is something I hadn't considered, and he brought up, and I thought it was really good advice. I think it was you, Scott, that talked about the direction in which you rinse the aircraft. Can you talk about that?
Right. Yeah. No, and it's another thing that, you don't think about, but we always would start at the nose and work our way back, and we would always rinse in the direction that the aircraft would be flying in, so you always rinse from the nose. A lot of times we see guys rinsing the aircraft from behind, or, squirting water around door seams from the backside, and then you're just pushing water through those door seals. But yeah, we always started from the top, the nose, and then worked our way back. Yep. Top down.
I'm laughing in case this isn't on video here. John raised his hand on that one, being guilty as charged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
we've all been there.
We've all done it. Yep.
You finish the rinse and you pop the doors. You're like, why is there so much water in here?
Exactly.
They're not designed like that.
Is the carpet wet, Todd? I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah, great
so
advice.
the word of advice is from nose to backside.
Nose to backside. Yep. That's how we did it. And that seemed to work really well. Yep. We didn't have any crazy water coming in the doors and all that. Yeah.
You're going to have water come in the chin bubbles on some models because they're open on the bottom, just like with a bubble window. A lot of the bubble windows have the bottom cut out of them.
Mm-hmm.
When you wash, just get in there and wipe everything down with a rag when you're done. And washing the inside's okay too.
Yeah.
You can use water and a bucket and just wipe it down and then wipe it up. I mean, it's easy. It's once you get used to it. I actually used to enjoy washing aircraft because it was kind of like, this is my time to just relax and do something.
Yeah.
That really doesn't, I'm like going to sign this off, right? I'm going to clean this up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's kind of cathartic, right?
yeah, it is
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, and we said this a few minutes earlier too. It's also a little bit of pride of ownership too.
Yeah,
So
for
far,
sure.
Absolutely.
clean machine. You step into that clean machine, you feel good about it. You know what it feels like. You know the vibrations of it. You know what exactly she's going to be like and acting in different ways. And you get that hands-on extra feeling there by washing that thing down. That's only to your advantage as a pilot.
And wash the belly. Wash the belly of the helicopter. Because
Yep.
what do people see when it flies over? They only see the belly. What do you see in the movies all the time? A belly with oil.
Greg, you brought up the interior of the aircraft. After our washes, we would make sure we went through the avionics and clean those. We used a soft bristled painter's brush to get all the dust and debris out of there. What do you guys recommend for that type of cleaning application?
Like that and chamois, the little glass chamois you get for your sunglasses that are soft, The worst thing is like, especially with like glass displays, you get any sort of sand or debris on them, don't just wipe it off. You can use a moist towel and lift the material off and then use a chamois to buff it down. And even the chamois you can buy like at the car at the auto parts supply, those leather chamois, those work good too.
Yep.
For some things, but I always used to I'd go buy a new pair of sunglasses and I'd put a little bag of chamois, chamois that come with it, and I would just hand it to the pilots as a gift. Hey, say clean the 530, to say clean the 430, use this,
Yeah.
and then you don't have all those scratches and
So
streaks and everything.
if you see me doing this with my glasses, that's wrong, right?
Yeah, don't take your T-shirt off and wipe.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people, like I know every time you ever walk into those optical centers there and use your T-shirt to clean the glasses, like, what are you doing? I'm like, relax. It's just a pair of glasses. We're not flying.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, John, I mean, yeah, brush, little light air, canned air. I've seen people use canned air where they just lightly dust it. Like in the law enforcement aircraft, you have a keyboard there. Well, even in the aircraft with certain different avionics, you'll have a little keyboard there and everything. Yeah, just blow the dust off of it with light air. Don't, you're not going to run 100 PSI on it, but, dust it off, use that, use the little brush, clean them up, vacuums, with a nice soft tip on the end of them. They have the small vacuums now with the little tubes on them. It's stuff like that's pretty, I mean, I'd like to say it's common sense.
I guess, and the theme of this entire conversation is take some time and pride with it.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Because you are dealing with an aircraft that's not cheap, first and foremost.
Right.
Secondly, you're basically enhancing the aircraft to avoid the long-term damage of it without kind of, fast forwarding any corrosion, finding out there's any issues with sheet metal on it, or even to what Scott was saying there, up into the rotor head, to kind of make sure that it's clean and non-vibration free. So there's no false readings and everything. You're kind of like, and going into the microcosms of it all, the electrical connections of it all, that's got to be an absolute tragedy once that gremlin gets going too. So it's,
It goes back to our last podcast. With contact enhancers,
Yeah. Contact enhancers. Yeah. The official first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it can open up a can of worms if you don't do it right. But at the same time, you're going to learn so much about that aircraft. You'll be so much more comfortable with it when you're maintaining it. It's going to be good,
Oh, and I think it's important to note that to take your time when you're washing and doing all this too. Take your time, dedicate some time to do it. Don't say, well, I got 10 minutes to wash this thing. It'd be better off to not wash it and wait till the next day when you have some time to wash it properly, and don't get in a hurry when you're doing it, because that leads to, mistakes and things like that. Yeah.
Ounce of prevention prevents a pound of pain, right? So
it's a great time to work on your tan too, if it's a nice day.
Guns out, guns out.
Yeah, look at Greg, as they say up in Canada, tarps off. Look at you, just want to get the shirt off and start waxing her down.
blinding everybody. Whoa, what is that?
Go ahead, John.
Scott, I'll direct this question at you, and Greg, you might have some input on this as well. But I think about some of our operations where we're out doing hover operations, and you get back to the airport, and your aircraft, the tail is just covered in carbon. That can be really difficult to get rid of. What do you guys recommend as far as getting rid of that? Have you come up and found any really effective ways of dealing with those?
Well, honestly, the best way I've found to deal with the carbon is to actually have, a coat of wax on the tail boom as well. Keep that waxed, because that will help, so that carbon won't stick to it. And then there's some really good washing solvents out there too. There's some good. I think we used to use a soap. It was called Carbon X.
Yep, that's one of them.
Yeah, and we used to wash aircraft with that.
Okay.
And that would do a really good job of getting that carbon off of the tail. So the different soaps and keeping the tail washed, keeping it waxed.
It will also take the wax off too. So
Yeah, it will. Then you got to wax it all over again
Gotcha.
because it takes it all off. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say once you clean it, you've gone down to parent material at that point, or parent paint.
yeah, if you have to get that deep into it with if it's really heavy and you got to use that, you just have to know you're going to have to wax it. But a lot of times, like Aero Magnolia and different soaps like that will just they'll melt the carbon off and you won't have to re-wax it. But it's a maintenance thing, right? You have to maintain your wax layer. But over time, it's not just the carbon, it's the heat that stresses the tail booms. The paint job, you'll notice that paint will start to spider web from the heat. And there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, it's just the heat's there, it's going to cook it. And eventually, I think the most repainted part on an aircraft is the tail boom. On a helicopter is a tail boom because of the heat stress.
Yeah,
The
that
heat
makes
damage.
sense.
But to your point, John, you can mitigate it a lot, like Scott says, with proper wax and all that. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to end up dealing with a repaint job at some point because you're going to wash it, scrub it, scrub it to the point where you're damaging the clear or whatever, the base layers.
I said that was my last question. I lied, and hopefully I'm not taking a question away from Val. But as we've been talking through this, and man, it's been over an hour that we've been talking about washing aircraft. And again, this is something we'd be like, oh, that's so elementary. How do you talk for an hour about washing aircraft? But there's obviously so much to consider. But when you guys think through all of your guys' experience, is there one aircraft that came in that was so filthy that it kind of, you remember it today? And if that did happen, what was that aircraft doing that made it so dirty? And maybe I'll start. So we did airborne use of force training a lot in the helicopters. So we go and hover and shoot out of the helicopter, and we were in a dirty environment when we were doing that. So not only are you in a dirty, dusty environment, the dust and dirt is getting all over the interior of the aircraft, all over the exterior of the aircraft, but you're hovering a lot of that time too. So the carbon's sticking to the tail. So you get back, there's brass sometimes in the interior of the aircraft, which you don't want. There's dirt all over the interior of the aircraft. There's carbon on the tail. It is absolutely filthy. There's dirt on the deck of the engine compartment. It's everywhere. So I always felt bad for the crew that was going to have to come in and clean up behind us after the airborne use of force training. So I don't know, in the Gulf, I'd imagine there's some pretty nasty environments in aircraft that you saw come in.
There were some that were very dirty, but honestly, we washed them almost every day because there were some aircraft that actually lived on platforms offshore, and they would stay out there for 7 days. So you can imagine, flying 8-10 hours a day for 7 days, and then they come in, boy, they were black. The whole tail boom was just black, and it would take us hours, honestly, to clean them and get them up. And then the worst thing was, of course, the guys go fishing offshore. So they would put their bait boxes and everything in the baggage compartment. So that was a whole nother layer of fish guts and stuff we had to clean out of the aircraft. So that also took hours, right? So when they were offshore for 7 days, they came back nasty. They were nasty.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, and you know what? There's also, in my world, we have those smokeless combustion liners. They're not really smokeless.
Yeah.
They reduce it a little bit, but they're not smokeless.
No, but it helped. It helped a lot. I remember when those came out and we started incorporating those, we were like, wow, this is a whole lot better. But it's not completely smokeless, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I'd say two. It's a tie. Firefighting, like with the medium aircraft firefighting, where they're hover work, doing sling work all day long, the tail booms are just cooked. And same deal, landing in dirt, unimproved LZs. dipping out of a river and then getting, whatever. And the EMS side, believe it or not, the EMS side can be pretty nasty at times. And, aircraft with, had a very bad patient on board with a bad, bleeding all over.
Yeah.
Blood. I've seen blood clear down the belly of the aircraft to the tail boom,
Wow.
But I would say number one is firefight. In my book, what I've experienced with the smoke. I mean, the ash, you'd have the windows covered in ash, everything. And then you'd get her home, you'd put her in the hangar and go over there a week later and climb in, and you're right back in the fire because it smelled like fire. Everything smelled like smoke from the fire.
Special pilots, man, one of those firefighters. And if any of you guys are listening, you guys are firefighters out there, thanks a lot. You guys are just unbelievably amazing to kind of fly through that kind of crap and then put her down at the end of the day and kind of sit there and go, I did my job today. Yeah.
I would say that was probably one of the most rewarding things. EMS is very rewarding, but
yes,
out working fire crews was really fun, really good. And you'd be on a fire base with a heli base with, 5 or 6 different operators, and everybody had the same goal. They'd help each other out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we'd laugh and joke and have a good time, but we're always, safety conscious and all that, making sure everybody was safe to go fly. But at the end of the day, it was good to help the communities and help the other folks we got to doing that kind of work. So it was fun.
Well, touching. I know it's a touching base here with John. This is touching base. This is right in your neighborhood, buddy. You're right in the thick of it right now, aren't you?
Yeah. As we speak, the community I live in is under an evacuation warning. There's a fire that started just a couple days ago. It's grown to 20,000 acres already, and I think there's 30-something thousand homes that are threatened as a result of this fire right now. So yeah, it's near and dear to me right now, and very thankful for the skill and work that those folks do. Whether you're flying the machines or you're working on them, making that mission happen, I'm very thankful for that.
Oh, you be safe first out there, buddy, and they're going to do their jobs. I'm sure of it.
Yep.
It's a team effort for sure.
100%. We're going to start kind of winding down this one, guys. We're going to do a quick review of the corrosion control manual, right? If one of you guys can kind of jump in on that one, and we'll kind of talk about the annexes that are model specific, with the mention, of course, to the PSE document and not just the engineering document here. I'll let you kind of lead into that one there, Greg.
Scott's the expert on this.
Scott's the expert. Okay, Scott, yeah. I defer to you.
Yeah, no. So you're right. You mentioned the annexes, and that's something that's relatively new. That's come out in the last 10 years. But on the corrosion control guide, there are specific annexes in the back of the manual there, and they're very specific for certain areas on which you need to look at and which you need to treat. And then we can also help you also in another way. We can tailor, a corrosion control guide or annex to your operations. If you just let us know, what you're doing and this is where you're operating in, we can kind of expand on those annexes to help your operation as well. And that's something that would come from our product support engineers.
Yeah, we can help you customize your corrosion.
There you go.
Control plan, basically. Because everybody's environment's different. Maybe not the environment, but what they have at the resources, ready at the resources, and the time they have. So,
and just so that we're all aware, you guys are available 24/7 at productsupport@bellflight.com.
Yeah, well, there's two layers, right? There's the CSEs, the customer service engineers that are available on the phone 24/7, and then product support is also available 24/7 at productsupport.com. Yeah, bellflight.com. Yep. So,
Scott, and then I guess the last part of that is the use of the CPC with the corrosion preventative compound.
Yeah, that corrosion preventative compound, there's a lot of places where it's called out in the manual to apply CPC after you get done removing a bolt or installing a bolt. You want to put the CPC compound on there, and it really does save your bolts and from getting surface corrosion on it. And it's a black compound. There's several different grades of it, but that is very important, especially when you're operating in different environments, to have that CPC on there.
It's a good habit practice just having some of that with you when you're changing hardware out or installing hardware and all that. Just get in the habit of reapplying that when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Put your torque seal over it so you can see your torque seal and you're good, because that'll save a lot of maintenance. And by the way, when you're applying that CPC, you're not just applying it to the hardware, you're applying it to the base component that the bolt goes through to, to some around the board, like around where the bolt comes out. There's always a little bit of bare metal there. Cover that up. That's going to protect that component too. So
You're creating a seal.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't like it because it's gummy and nasty, but it'll save you hundreds of thousands of dollars if you form a good habit there, a good practice. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I guess in wrapping this all up, guys, and I guess we'll kind of leave it. We'll end it off on both of you here. But like again, I mentioned it a few minutes earlier. The common theme is really take your time. Take your time. Get to know the helicopter on a one-on-one level, but also just take your time and kind of feeling out the helicopter for where it's going to get the dirtiest, and you're going to find minor preventable maintenance that might come along the way. Any last piece of advice, I guess, kind of to build on that, Scott? I'll let you lead with that one, buddy.
Yeah, like we talked about, just that to me, washing the aircraft is the first step in maintenance. Anytime you're going to maintain the aircraft, that's a huge part of maintenance, is just washing the aircraft. A lot of people think maintenance is, the nuts and bolts of it and doing that, but washing the aircraft is really important, because you get to see the whole aircraft. You touch the whole aircraft. So that to me is the most important thing, is washing the aircraft and looking at it. Yep.
Over to you, Greg.
yeah, I agree with Scott 100%. Have a good look at it, but you know what? You should have some fun too, because it's not mind-boggling to wash an aircraft. Enjoy it.
Like catching a suntan while you're doing it. Is that what
exactly. Being out in the environment when it's whatever, getting chewed up by mosquitoes, whatever it is.
There you go.
For the experience, but no, it can be an enjoyable thing to get out there and relax, and just wash an aircraft and de-stress a little bit.
Nice. Yep. Yeah. That's just as important nowadays too.
It is. Yep.
To our flyer, John.
Yeah, like you said, two things you said. One is you can't inspect if it's dirty, which I like, but two, I really did enjoy and still enjoy washing aircraft and vehicles. It goes to the pride of ownership that we talked about. But again, it's fun unless it's cold. When it's cold, it's not fun. Then you just got a chore. But I love it. It's a lot of fun. So thank you guys for joining us to talk about a lot of the nuances that surround such a topic that seems elementary, but in reality, it's not. There's a lot of things to consider. So thank you guys for breaking that down and for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You guys, thanks for coming on to Vertical MRO. It's always a blast, guys. Thanks for coming on board with us. And to our listeners, if you've liked this, hit that subscribe or like button, and we'll be more than happy to bring you more interesting things like this, especially on the Bell Tech Talk. Not TikTok, Tech Talk. So, as Greg will do a dance afterwards. I'm sure he'll do a video.
I'm sure I will. Yeah,
there it is. So to that, I say thanks a lot, everybody, for listening. To our guests, to John, thanks, God. John, be safe, please. And then you guys, like I said, be safe out in your neck of the woods there as well. Enjoy the heat and enjoy the high.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Bell Tech Talk segment of Vertical MRO Podcast. We want to hear from you. Have a technical topic for the team or a favorite technical tip? Let us know. Our email is techtalk@bellflight.com. That's TECHTALK @bellflight.com. If you're having a technical issue with the aircraft, as always, our team is here 24/7 at productsupport@bellflight.com. If you like what you heard, subscribe and come back for more.